Hello everyone, hope you are doing well. Welcome back to Automation Edge training video. As you have seen in earlier API use case 1 video, the essential part of REST API are URL endpoint is the URL link that represents the resources we want to access. Resources can be text, image, documents or any data entry. HTTP methods such as get, post, put, patch and delete are used in RESTful API development to specify the type of action being performed on the resource. API parameters. Parameters are options that can be passed with the endpoint to influence the response. In GET request, they are found in the string at the end of the API URL path. In POST request, they are found in the POST body. For example, username, password, etc. Authentication. Authentication is a security mechanism that controls their exposure mainly through user credentials and encrypted access codes. For example, basic authentication, API keys, or 2.0, etc. Request headers. Request header contains metadata for the HTTP request. It contains additional information about the request. For example, browser type, format supported by the client, format of the message body, cache settings, etc. Request body. Request body contains the actual message content. In this video, we are going to see use case of executor workflow deployed on AutomationEdge server. But before starting the use case, I hope you have watched our previous video, Introduction to API and API use case 1. In case you haven't already, I encouraged you to watch it and familiarize yourself with API, types of API, Postman, and how to use advanced REST client step. I believe it's worth your time. Without further delay, let's continue with the use case. In this use case, we are going to use the web services of AutomationEdge. We will execute the workflow assigned to agent through advanced REST client step. AutomationEdge REST API uses custom authentication. The REST API to authenticate provides session token in the response if valid user credentials are provided. So, we will authenticate the URL and fetch the session token. Then, we will provide the session token and request body parameters and execute the AutomationEdge workflow using advanced REST client step. We will accept the username, password and URL as a runtime parameters, and to convert them into fields we are going to use getVariable step. Then we will authenticate the URL using advanced REST client, which will call the authenticate API of AutomationEdge, and we will fetch the session token from the HTTP response received from authentication API call using JSON input step. Then we will create a request body in Modified JavaScript, and through advanced REST client we will provide the session token and the request body parameters to call REST API of AutomationEdge to execute the workflow. For this we are going to use three URLs of AutomationEdge. Base application URL t3.automationedge.com/aengine/rest, then authentication URL t3.automationedge.com/aengine/rest/authenticate. Authenticate URL is used to call the authenticate API of AutomationEdge, and execute URL, it is used to execute the workflow on AutomationEdge. Let's go to the Process Studio and design the use case. As you can see, we have created a project called as training. Under training project, we have created workflow AE authenticate execute API. We will need REST-based application URL, username and password. So let us define runtime parameter for base application URL, username and password. Let's double click on the canvas, open workflow properties, go to the parameters tab. Let's declare the base URL. Let's declare T3 server login credentials. Click on OK button. Now, to use these runtime parameters, let's add getVariable step, which will convert the runtime parameters into the fields. Let's rename the step. Declare fields URL, username and password. Select the variables and the data type as string. Click on the OK button. In order to make use of REST URL, authentication is necessary. Thus, we will declare authentication URL. To execute a service, we will need an execute URL, for which we will use a modified JavaScript step. Additionally, we will need the request body to pass while calling the execute API. So, all these three variables we will declare inside a modified JavaScript. Let's define a variable authentication URL. Let's declare a variable for execute URL. And now let's declare a variable for request body. So as you can see here in the request body, we have specified organization code, workflow name which we need to execute, user ID, source and response mail subject if it contains, and also the list of parameters if the workflow has runtime and configuration parameters. That parameters we can provide here in the params. So this is the request body. Click on get variables. Let's change the step name as MJS URL and request body. Click on OK. Now let's take the advanced REST client step to consume REST services. Let's double click on advanced REST client and do the configuration. Let's give the step name as authenticate REST call. Let's write the method as post. As discussed in the earlier video, post is used to send the data to a server to create or update a resource. We have defined URL in the field, so let's select the authenticate URL field from the drop-down. For AutomationEdge authentication URL request, we are not going to do any configuration in settings, authorization, headers and request body. Let's go to the parameters tab. In parameters tab, we need to provide username and password. Let's write parameter key as username. Select field user from the drop-down. Write password as parameter key. Select the pass field from the drop-down. Make a note that username and password key should be in a small case as REST API accepts it in a small case. Let's go to the last tab, HTTP response. Here we can provide the output fields like response status, response headers, response body, output file field, etc. We'll keep the default field name. We can also test the API using test API button. Let's click on the OK button to save the configuration. Let's save this in the JSON input step as the response is in JSON format. For that, let's add the JSON input step. Let's configure the JSON input step. Rename the JSON input step as INF session token. Select the checkbox source is from previous step. Select the response body field from the drop-down. Now, let's go to the fields tab. Declare the session token field. Write the path as $.session Select the type as string. We are fetching session token from the request body. So we have added path as $.session Click on the OK button. Let's add the text file output to store the session token into text file. Let's configure the text file output step. Rename the step as OTF session token. Select the file location. Go to the fields tab. Select the field as session token, type as string. Click on the OK button. Save the workflow and let's execute this to observe the result. You can see the workflow is executed successfully. Let's open the output file. As you can see, session token is fetched and saved in the file. Now, let's go back to Process Studio. Now, we will use the advanced REST client again for executing the workflow from AutomationEdge server. Let's add the advanced REST client step. Connect with the text file output. Let's configure the advanced REST client again. Write the step name as execute REST call. Let's write the method as post. Let's select the URL from the drop-down field as execute URL. Define the headers. We will define two headers. One content type and the other is session token. Select the content type from the drop-down of header key. Header value will be application/JSON. Next header is session token. It is not available in the drop-down. Need to type the key. Select the header value from the header value field drop-down as session token. Let's go to the request body and select the option read from field. Select JSON option from the field name drop-down. Next, select the request body from the drop-down. Click on the OK button. Save the workflow and let's execute the workflow to view the output. So before execution, let us go to the server. Here, as you can see, there are no requests available in the request page. Let's execute the workflow from the Process Studio. Once we execute from the Process Studio, we can go back to the server and refresh the request page. As you can see, the execution is started. It is completed. In this way, we can use Advanced REST Client step. I hope this video has provided you with valuable insights into using the Advanced REST Client step. Thank you for watching, and I hope you are now well equipped to streamline your API related tasks using the Advanced REST Client step in Automation Edge. Happy learning!